You are watching Maximus Aviation.
So as you know, here on the channel, we've been on this South Korean runway wall of death story like a dog on a bone. But I gotta tell you, something stinks about this whole situation. Because the more I dig and research, the less information I can find about how this dangerous killer airport wall managed to slip through the cracks. But now, now that the word is out that the South Korean government approved the airport runway walls, yes, walls, as in plural, now the truth has been publicly exposed, somebody's going to have to pay. And hopefully sooner rather than later. But first, greetings everybody, Maximus here. I hope you're all doing well, wherever you may be all around this great big world of ours. So just when I think we've completely covered the story of the South Korean airport walls of death, more and more news dribbles out of South Korea. And I do mean dribbles. Because South Korea continues to play its cards close to the vest on this one. And frankly, no disrespect to our friends in free South Korea, but they are acting more like their North Korean neighbors in this situation than an open free society would. But hey, like I said, that's just my opinion. But still, that is a bit concerning. However, this story affected me personally. I guess not only it was traumatic, but quite a bit fascinating at the same time. Oh, and obviously you clicked on the video, so I'm happy to know that I'm not alone in my obsessing interest in this story. So let's get to some recent developments first, and then we'll get to that stinking wall. As always, I'll include chapters so you can move around as you like. Okay, starting with Mound International Airport. It was supposed to reopen on 7 January, but now its closure will be extended until 14 January at the earliest, as work to remove the wreckage of Jeju Air Flight 2216 continues. However, the cockpit voice recorder transcript was completed on January 4th, so that means they already know what happened in the cockpit at least. There's also news about the victims this week, as the poor souls on board, all 179 victims of the crash, have now been formally identified. And sadly, but not surprisingly, after what we all witnessed, of the 181 passengers on Jeju 2216, only 5 intact bodies were recovered from the wreckage, 2 of those being the surviving flight attendants seated in the tail who are amazingly recovering in the hospital. However, the rest of the victims' remains were so badly, let's say kinetically disincorporated, that DNA is the only way possible to return them, or more specifically, sadly, what pieces are left of them to their families. Of the 179 people aboard who died, 147 were identified through fingerprints and 32 with DNA. Meanwhile, the Boeing 737's 2 heavily damaged CFM engines and other critical components have been transferred to a hangar for further investigation. With initial data extraction of the cockpit voice recorder completed on 4 January, 2 South Korean representatives delivered the heavily damaged flight data recorder to Washington, D.C. for further analysis on 7 January. So as I mentioned, South Korean officials already know what went on in the cockpit and most likely what happened since the voice recorder has already been deciphered. But they want to compare the words they heard and the information to the data recorder, so now we have to wait and see if the U.S. can fix and extract the flight data information from the damaged recorder. Also on Tuesday, January 7, South Korean officials said they had determined the cause of the crash after finding bird feathers in one of the engines, but they don't yet know if both engines were struck or inoperable. However, at the same time, officials continue to aggressively insist that their reinforced runway bunker wall of death was completely up to code and not too close to the runway. However, instead they'd rather focus on what caused the plane's engines to fail and why the landing gear wasn't deployed along with any other pilot reactions to the bird strike. Okay, but here's the thing. This is not exactly a Sherlock Holmes mystery at all. We all know what happened because we meaning like the whole universe, have all watched the entire crash from bird strike to obliteration with our own eyes. Of course it was a bird strike, so feathers in the engine are no surprise. We saw the CFM-56 engines turn the birds into flaming piles of goo. So since South Korea already knows at the very least the communication between the pilots, they have to know more than they are publicly telling us. Still, South Korea continues to insist that the plane was the problem, not their airport construction. And like I said in previous videos, that kind of blatant obfuscation borders on criminal negligence at the very least. In other recent news, South Korean Transport Minister Park Sang-woo, who is the overall official in charge of the country's transportation system, said he plans to resign as a result of South Korea's colossal failure in the crash. However, it remains to be seen when that will actually happen. Okay, so if you're a subscriber to the channel, you know we've talked about Mound Airport's runway ILS death wall before. But I've come across some more information that only points to a much deeper cover-up within at least the South Korean Transportation Authority, and probably one of the reasons the head of the agency said he's going to resign. In March of 2020, Kookmin, a South Korean news site, obtained a bid announcement for the Mound Airport Instrument Lending Facility Improvement bid by the Korea Airport Corporation. In the bid from the airport, they included a phrase translated into English which states that the task description included the review of measures to secure fragility, which means that the ILS needed to be frangible or breakable, thus the word fragility. But there's no doubt that the design required it to be frangible. Also, in the bid, it specifically stated that the location of the landing facility installation included all related ICAO laws, as well as the Southern Korean Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transportation's Airport Safety Operations Standards, according to the ICAO manual. However, as we all now know, the localizer at Mound installed the antenna on a foundation of about 2 meters of concrete to support the antenna, and the Ministry of Land and Transportation knew the concrete was there and approved the job anyway. So there's no way South Korea can deny they weren't aware the structure was there, nor similar structures at least 3 other airports. Initially, the South Korean government claimed the embankment did not violate regulations, asserting it was outside the safety zone requiring frangible or breakable materials. Yet, when the bid was publicly exposed, suggesting the concrete structure was indeed within the regulated area or the danger zone with the government's okay, then the ministry shifted its position, stating that the matter was, quote, now under review. So this debate is not merely about technicalities, it underscores a critical lapse in prioritizing safety. Similar hazardous structures exist at other South Korean airports. There are 3 airports in South Korea with these elevated reinforced ILS mounds at the end of their runways. Yet while South Korea continues to act like their wall wasn't the problem, Mound International Airport failed to meet safety standards for installation of its localizer. In the airport's latest operation manual, published on May 9, 2024 by Korea Airports Corporation, it indicated that Mound International Airport failed to comply with RISA, or Runway End Safety Area Regulations, outlined in the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transportation Standards for Safe Operation of Airports. The manual, which details airport facilities, emergency operation plans, and safety management systems, specifically noted that the localizer's installation point did not meet recommended standards. Under the guidelines, the airport must maintain a safety area of 240 meters from the runway's end. However, the localizer was installed just 202 meters from the southern end, or runway 1, and 199 meters from the northern runway 19's direction. KAC flagged the airport for having a RISA that fell 38 meters short in one direction and 41 meters short in the other direction. However, back in 2024 at the time, airport officials said that adjustments would be considered during the airport's second phase of expansion, which was scheduled soon. However, sadly, it wasn't soon enough to save 179 lives. And back in 2021, when an assessment was done at Mound Airport in preparation for its runway expansion project, the assessment was that the airport would also experience an increase in bird strikes. For its size per capita in South Korea, Mound already had the highest bird strike to flight ratio in the country. And coincidentally, just 10 days before the December 29 Jeju tragedy, Mound Airport officials had a meeting to discuss the issue of bird collisions, specifically that compared to the same time in the year previous, bird strikes had indeed increased exponentially. And also at that same December 2024 meeting, they sent out a new advisory to all airlines flying in and out of Mound Airport to be aware of the increase in bird activity. And the birds that surround Mound Airport are not just your tiny everyday birds either. We're talking about large flocks and migrations of birds from mallard ducks to cormorants. And these are birds that can weigh as much as 12 pounds with wingspans of up to 4 feet. So we're talking butterball, turkey-sized birds here, an entire flock, hundreds of thousands of them. might as well be anti-aircraft fire. And with that, I'm pretty sure this should wrap up our coverage of all things South Korea. Well, for a while at least. At least until the CVR and data come back and give us something new to talk about. But until then, you know what to do. You gotta let me know down below. And as always, I thank you for stopping by. I always appreciate that you took the time to do so. Oh, and before you go, don't forget to do all that YouTube-y stuff on your way out. And until next time, as always, of course, this is Maximus.